Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. This is our Intro to Rulerwork course, and we're going to be starting with some straight lines that we're going to do at 2-inch intervals for today's lesson. This is about as easy as it gets. It's a great way to learn how to move your ruler and your machine and your fabric in a way that is nice and simple and easy, and it's something that you'll be able to use time and again in a bunch of different ways to create really unique looks for your quilts. So just a reminder that this course is taught for both the long arm and the domestic sewing machine. For these videos, I'm going to be demonstrating and explaining while I'm working on the domestic sewing machine, but in the upper corner, once I actually start quilting, you're going to be seeing me do it on the long arm. There's a little bit of difference because when you are quilting on a domestic sewing machine, you are moving your fabric and your ruler at the same time, and your sewing machine stays stationary. And when you are working on your long arm, you are just moving the ruler in your sewing machine and your fabric stays stationary. So it's a little different, but the concepts are the same and the ability to make it look really cool is also the same. So we're going to be doing quilt as you go for the domestic sewing machine version. And on the long arm, you can just make it and quilt away. You can make your top and quilt like normal. What is helpful to have at this step is going to be a ruler. Any quilting ruler will do, the same ones you use to cut up your fabric in the first place. And we're going to be using a friction gel pen to mark out our lines. Now, I am not using any spray basting on these quilt as you go sandwiches. If that's something that you want to use, you absolutely can do that. But I find that as long as I'm using cotton batting, which this is great to use scraps with, plus if you get the kit from us, we send you cotton batting, then everything kind of stays pretty well together. You may get a few lumps and bumps if you're not super careful though. So feel free to spray base if you like it. Gives me a headache, so that's why I don't do it. Now, typically you're going to be following the lines on a quilt, and you're going to be using that to create your straight lines because you can line it up with your piecing lines or your row lines or something like that. But to make this more simple so that we can concentrate on the quilting and not trying to work around whatever piece design there is, we're just using plain squares that are going to finish at 10 inches. So I'm going to mark lines at 2-inch intervals here. And for this first one, because remember we're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm lining up that 2 1/4 inch mark with the edge of my fabric, and that way I'll be able to have even intervals. Now I find that it's easier for me to mark with my friction gel pen if I start from the center and work my way out. And this does not need to be super dark. I did it super dark so that you could see it there at home, but as long as you can see it, that's fine. I do find that these friction gel pens go away really easily with heat. Occasionally you can see like a shadow of where it once was. So make sure you're testing it on the quilt that you're working with to be sure. But I know they can come back in the freezing cold, but I've never personally experienced that. And I have a quilt that I marked all up and down with these when I was doing ruler work on it, and it traveled the country in planes, trains, and automobiles, and not a single mark came back. So it has to be really cold for that to happen. All right, so next time, because we don't have to deal with the seam allowance anymore, I am lining up that 2-inch line right on the line that I just marked, and I'm going to continue doing that across, so that way I can have a nice, easy line to follow when I'm sewing. Now, what we're about to do, you could also easily accomplish with a walking foot on your home sewing machine. But it's good to get used to it in a nice, easy way with an easy stitch and an easy straight line to follow by doing this. And then later on, we'll be able to use the same techniques to do lots of really cool things. Now, if you're on a long arm, you may think, okay, I'm just going to use my channel locks to do that. But that assumes that your quilting is straight, your piecing is straight, and your leaders are straight, and you've pinned everything on straight. And I don't know about you, but I've never had any of those things come together correctly every single time, let alone all four. So this is why I like to use my ruler work whenever I'm doing straight lines on the long arm. All right, so we're going to start with Slim by Angela Walters. If you are on the long arm, I suggest that you use this to outline your entire block first, and then get through going on with your ruler work. I outline every single block because it gives me a nice place to sort of travel as I'm working. That's not something you have to worry about on the domestic, but it certainly is with the long arm. Now, if you do not have a stitch regulator on your long arm, or you're working on a sit down machine, then you are the stitch regulator. So you have to listen as much as it is you're kind of watching and sewing, because you have to make sure that your stitches are nice and even. So that means moving at an even pace with your moving either the fabric or machine, depending on what method you're using, and making sure that the stitch sounds level. So basically it sounds like it's going at the same pace, it's nice and rhythmic, as opposed to going all over the place, fast and slow. One thing that is the most challenging thing to get used to when you're doing ruler work, whether it's on the domestic or the long arm, is you always are positioning your ruler a 1/4 inch away from wherever it is you want to sew, because your needle is exactly a 1/4 inch from all of the outside edges of your ruler foot. So what you want to do is hold your ruler so that it is parallel to the line that you want to be working on. In this case, it's going to be a nice straight line. So what I like to do is I have a speed control on my machine. So I normally, when I'm piecing, I sew at the fastest speed. When I'm doing any quilting on my home sewing machine, I usually bring it down to the medium speed, because that way I can put my foot down all the way and not have to worry about getting too out of control. So I'm going to get myself up to a nice steady speed. And then for the domestic, you're just going to be following that line. And as long as you hold it nice and steady, you're gonna be just fine. Now, your ruler is gonna have kind of a sweet spot. So I'm kind of getting to the end of my sweet spot here. About an inch or so beforehand is where I want to stop everything and move my ruler. Whenever you get kind of towards the ends, whether you're working on your domestic or your long arm, that's when it's more likely for the ruler to shift on you, and then you don't get the shape you want, or you just don't have as much control. So I like to always quilt about an inch or so in from either side. Move down a little more. What's really nice about these Angela Walters rulers too is they have kind of a grip on the back, which means not so much when you're working on the long arm, but when you're working on your domestic sewing machine, it really helps you kind of hold everything in place. So that is a really nice feature. All right, when you're all done, it's good to have the practice of pulling your bobbin thread up to the top. That's what you would want to do if you were actually working on a quilt. And so to do that, you just kind of pull that thread out a little bit, and then you put your needle down and up again. And then this little part here, that is my bobbin thread. So I can clip that with scissors, and then I've got everything pulled to the top, so it's going to be nice and neat. Now, before we go any farther, I want to take a minute to examine what I've done so far. I'm really happy with this. I've got nice even lines, so I did a good job of being my own stitch regulator. On my long arm, I have a stitch regulator, so it's always going to make sure I have nice even stitches no matter how fast or slow I go. So that's really a nice feature if you're in shopping for a long arm, to have that possibility. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to check my tension on the back. This is really good. I'm not seeing anything that what we call pokies, where you see the bobbin or the top thread poking through to the bottom. I don't see that on either side, which means really, really good things. It means that those threads are meeting in the batting where they're supposed to. And I find in general that it's a lot easier to get really solid tension without adjusting anything on your machine when you're doing ruler work than it is when you're doing free motion. So that doesn't mean that you're going to have the exact same experience as I do. A lot of times people, when they're learning, will use one color in their top thread and another color in their bottom thread so they can easily tell if they're experiencing a problem. But now that I can tell that everything is looking good, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stitch down my other lines. Now again, this is supposed to be as easy as it possibly can. This is just to start getting used to the idea of one, keeping your ruler a 1/4 inch away from wherever it is you actually want to stitch so that there's room for the edge of the ruler foot to be always in contact with your ruler, and then your needle to be right on that line. And also get used to the fact of being your own stitch regulator if that's something you have to do because of the limitations of your long arm or you're working with a sit-down sewing machine. Once again, I'm going to start by bringing my needle down and up again. And then I'm going to take the tail of that thread and grab it so that I can pull that bobbin thread to the top. You're going to want to do this whether you're on your sit-down machine or your long arm. It helps prevent thread nests from becoming a problem underneath. Once again, I am just going to quilt until I get to where that sweet spot ends on the long arm, which is about 1 inch to the edge. And then I'm starting again about 1 inch to the edge there, and I'm going to work my way down. And feel free to stop and adjust at any time, but I suggest you stop with your needle down and your machine off, whether you're on your long arm or your sit-down sewing machine, because that will mean that when you get started again, you're not going to end up being all over the place. That is where Rulerwork can really go bad if you kind of don't stop when you're attempting to move things. All right, so now that I know that my tension is good on the other side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to travel within the batting here to get to my next line. Now, if you're on the long arm, this is where traveling happens. So here's a common thing with the long arm. So it's a little too low right now. It's not letting my fabric move, and that's part of the reason why it was getting bunchy. So I've raised it up a little bit. We're going to make sure that's okay. And I think we're good. So I'm just traveling over in the part that eventually is going to get cut off. But if you're doing it on the long arm, that's where you kind of want to travel a little bit. And I'm going to actually make a little bit more of an adjustment. I'm going to bring it down just a smidge. So this is all, it's when you are getting used to where your foot placement should be. Know that it can go up and down a little bit, and you may need to do a little bit of experimenting to figure out what is going to be best for you. All right, so now we're going to go back. It's really good to be able to go all different directions when you're doing this. That's the reason why we use Rulerwork, because then we're not limited to, you know, a walking foot, which can only go one direction, and that's forward. And I know that there are all kinds of books out there that give you lots of different options for that, but this way I can really do a lot without ever turning the quilt, which is the thing we want to have happen. All right, so we're just going to keep working our way back, trying to stay on that line. And I'm actually going to check my tension because this is looking just a smidge different now that I'm going back. And actually it looks okay. It doesn't look as good as my other one, but it is good enough. So we're going to let it be. But anytime you see any kind of a difference, take a look, inspect what's going on underneath, and see if you have to make adjustments. And you may find that your machine likes to go one way, but not the other. For my long arm, for example, it will go up, right, or up and down, no problem. It can go side to side when I'm doing free motion, but when I'm doing long arm ruler work, it will absolutely will not go from right to left. Go left to right just fine, but it will not go the other way. So you kind of have to do a little bit of experimenting there too to kind of see what works for you. So again, if you're doing this on the long arm, just make sure you're using that ruler to help travel along the edge. But if you're doing it on the domestic, just travel in the batting, the part that's going to get cut off. Yeah, that bunching is totally gone now that I have raised that foot up just a smidge. And we're getting really nice results. All right, so you can see here that I'm kind of coming out at an angle. If I don't adjust this right now, then I'm not going to stay on my line. So I want to make sure that I do just the teeniest of adjustments. So that way I'm staying a 1/4 inch away. And if you find that you're getting off, you want to just make small adjustments to get back to where you're at. Because if you all of a sudden make a really big turn, then it's not going to look like a straight line anymore. All right, so that's it. We have conquered our 2-inch straight line. So we should have 2 inches between each one of these. If you feel like you need some more practice, then go 1 inch in between. You could go 1/2 inch, even 1/4 inch in between. If you feel like you need to get a little bit better at this before you move on to the next block. Practice is always a good thing. And next up, we're going to start using this to make different size shapes. So it'll be fun. We can outline some triangles. We can create some dimension within triangles. There's lots of possibilities for what you can do with this besides just straight up and down lines like this. So next up, we are going to draw out a 1/2 square triangle block on our just plain fabric block. And then we're going to learn how to outline that. That's one of the things that I really love to do. And then you can do something fun on the inside. And we're going to keep building on that skill so you can learn how to create lots of really fun texture with your 1/2 square triangles, make them look absolutely fantastic with really just the same techniques that we just learned here. All right, stay tuned, and until next time, happy quilting.